These are things that have been coming up in my teaching for the last year or so. I've been teaching the foundation studies and a practitioners group, and a number of points seem to keep coming up that people ask a lot of questions about, and I thought I would just address them kind of in a global way today. So, to begin with, I just want to talk a little bit about the problem that we have with delusion. That's the sense of being a separate individual self. Fundamentally, it arises out of thoughts and emotions that we have reified. We have made them very real. And, you know, we say this all the time here, but the depth of the reification is profound. And we tend to think that because we see things a certain way, that we could actually understand the nature of anything. Anything at all. Thought gives us a wonderful way of looking into our experience and kind of making some kind of linear sense out of it. The thing about thought is that that linear sense that it's giving us is a total imagination. It's not real. It's very functional, however, and it is a beautiful expression of the divine, of reality. It's just that our problem with it is we take thoughts and emotions to be something real in themselves. We identify them through definitions. So, an example of how we get confused, and we do it in a very innocent way. For example, right now, we believe that we know where we are. We believe we're here at the Center for Sacred Sciences in Eugene, in the United States, on the planet Earth, in the Milky Way galaxy, in infinite space. Now, where are we, really, based on that? Well, of course, relatively speaking, we're at the Center for Sacred Sciences in Eugene, Oregon. But notice something about this. It doesn't tell us anything absolute. Nothing. It gives us a description that is based on other thoughts so that we can have a navigable, meaningful understanding of where we are. But the fact of it is, we don't know where we are. All we know is a description based on stories and very neatly delineated on maps. But that's it. Where are we really? Now that begs the question, of course, because when we ask, where are we? Well, then comes this other question, well, who the hell are we? Who are we and where are we? Are big questions. And we have pretty much used thought and our feelings and emotions to cinch it down so that we know. Because if we don't know, it's frightening. We want to know, because within our story world, not to know is extremely unsettling and gives us a strong sense of insecurity. So if we don't know where we are, then we might ask the question, well, when is this? And of course, it's the same problem. We have thoughts that tell us when this is. This is June 24th, 2018. This is a number, a thought. And it tells us what? It gives us a nice relative way of keeping track of events in our life. Keeps track of time. But then we have to ask ourselves, if we're going to be looking into these things, well, what is time? And of course, we talk about this a lot at the center. Well, time is a thought. It's an imagination. When we really look at it, it's daunting for our mind, because our mind doesn't have any way of comprehending the absence of time, because our minds are made of time. Now, when I say that our minds are made of time, it sounds like I'm saying that time is real. No, I'm not saying that. Time is an imagination. And when we look around, we see that everything that we think is a thing actually exists in time. And without time, couldn't exist. Could not exist. So again, then we are brought back to this thing. We go, well, then certainly time must be real. But do we ever experience time? Well, we seem to. For example, today, just a little bit ago, we came walking through this door. Notice, a little bit ago. Time, right? Time. But when was that we came walking through that door? Well, we go, well, it was 15 minutes ago. But that's just a thought. And that thought is arising right now. So this is troubling. It's very troubling because our world is constructed on time, and we can't find anything in time, truly. We have thoughts that make that sense of time seem very real, but all of our stories and all of our thoughts are constructed out of time, showing us something of the nature of all of our stories and all of our beliefs. So that's kind of bizarre. Well, the mystics really testify, all the mystics from all the traditions testify, that the only time there is now. And when thoughts arise telling us of a past, that thought is just arising now. And the only place we ever experience in our life is here. But how about when you're home? You're here, right here. So where is here? Where is this? All of our stories about where we are just tell us relatively where we are, but where are we? We are in the locus of awareness, knowing itself, here and now. That's it. But that's the absolute truth, and we're not trying to get rid of relative truth. We're not trying to get rid of the conventional world. It is a beautiful expression of the divine, as we will see. As we already know, in fact, we're just distracted from knowing that through our thoughts about our experience. And the fact that we take our thoughts to be real in themselves. So fundamentally, the spiritual path is really a path driven by longing to rediscover our true identity. Longing to know ourselves. And it's helpful to start out here to recognize we are not going to find our true identity in time or space. It ain't there. But from the mind's perspective, there ain't nowhere else, right? This is what we believe. But all of our ideas of where we are just thoughts. And as we start to see that, we know where we are, and we know when it is, here and now. Reality is eternally here. And so we limit our investigation to here and now. It's pretty straightforward, right? It is. We just pay attention, and when we pay attention on our path, we set aside our thoughts. We just, we don't let thoughts tell us how it is. We want to look beneath thought to see what is really here. Kind of like what we've been doing. We look at what we hold to be real, and we see it's not. And it is this process of seeing what is not real that brings us to the recognition of that which is real. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that we are driven on our path by longing. We are always moving towards happiness, away from discomfort. That's just obvious, right? I mean, even if we are a person that does self-mutilation, we do that because we feel like somewhere in our being that this is going to make us happy, or we would not do it. So we have all kinds of confused ways of seeking happiness, many of which are cruel. And clearly they do not bring happiness, but because we don't notice that, we continue striving. We continue to strive. When we do notice that, we stop doing things that are painful. We start to realize, oh, that's really painful. We stop doing it. I mean, we all have moments in our life when we can remember when we were a little kid and we did something on the playground to some other kid, that was just not nice. And at the time, it just seemed like, I want that truck and they have it and I want it and I'm taking it from them. And so, you push them down or do something like that. But then later, after you've kind of looked more closely into your life and done a little bit of maturing, you look back at that and you wince and you go, oh my God, that was so cruel. And that's really a process of this path. We see as we go through life, we are seeking happiness. We think we're doing something that's bringing us happiness, and then we go, oh, this is painful. And suddenly we cease doing it. It just stops happening. We don't strive for happiness when we know that it is going to bring us suffering. So this is really what the spiritual path is about. As we pay attention, we see more and more that things don't actually work that we've been doing for years. Striving to be happy, trying to get away from states of mind that we don't like. We push them away. It doesn't help. We think it helps. It doesn't help. And we start to discover that. And after a while, we learn a new way. Just kind of sort of the Braille method, working our way to the truth. But what's interesting is that we know that there is a happiness that we are seeking, and that longing really is a reflection of that happiness. That longing is the knowing that true happiness exists. And that's what propels it along. It is the divine spark within us that longs. It is love for our fundamental nature, which seems to be missing in our experience, and it is calling us home. That's what it really is. I mean, you can feel it, and as you do a spiritual path, and I know many here on a spiritual path can attest to this. And so, even though we're lost in delusion, reality is still bleeding through all of our stories in the form of longing. Longing to wake up. And it is really the divine within us that is longing. We feel it. We recognize it within ourselves. But we don't know what it is through our thoughts and our stories. This divine nature, that which is calling us, we have all kinds of names for this, of course. Often we call it God, or Allah, or Shiva. There's all kinds of names, but at the center, we usually talk about it as consciousness or awareness. And I use those terms interchangeably just because they really are the same. It's just, they're two ways of talking about the same thing. But awareness is a really useful term because it points directly at what is going on. It points directly to the truth of what we are. Awareness is what we call knowing. To know is to be aware. But it's interesting because awareness actually does not know anything other than itself. Awareness is infinite. And infinity is one of those words that we can't really define. I mean, we can define it, of course, in thought. But just like everything else, I mean, we all know that feeling of laying in bed when we were a little kid and looking out the window at the sky and going, where is the end of it? Everybody knows that. Everyone's had that experience, right? Yeah, so you're laying there and you're looking at the sky and your mind is like lurching forward, trying to find the end. And you go, oh, it's just, there's no end. How can that be? And the mind just kind of like blinks out for a moment. There's something very powerful about that blinking out. It's a process of realizing I can't know through thought. It's wisdom. But what do? We go, I can't figure it out. We're anxious about this, so we give it a name, and we call it infinity. It's infinite. So now we know. But the reality is hidden from us. And we don't know it. And we don't continue to look. Now, this is kind of what we were saying earlier, but it's more direct. When you look at something in your life and you give it a name, you're doing the same thing. You look at me, you go, that's Todd. No, it's not true. You look at yourself, and it's not what you think. You look at a tree. The tree hides, that name, the perception tree hides the infinite nature of what is being seen. It hides it. Call this a hand. It's beautiful because you see, in our conventional world, yes, indeed, it's a hand. Or a tree is a tree. And you are you and I am me. And this is all very useful. But it's all imagination being superimposed on the infinite. The infinite is aware, and awareness knows only itself. We're going to look at that in a moment, a little bit more closely. So as we settle into meditation, these are the kinds of things that we begin to recognize. We begin to see that thoughts are just thoughts. And what's beneath it? We don't know. We can't know through thought. If we think we know, that's just another thought. This awareness that we're talking about is what you're experiencing right now. It's this ordinary, what we think of as ordinary awareness. So let's take a couple of minutes to just settle into this moment and be with the reality of what is here. And to do this really is something that we don't really want to apply a lot of effort to, but it's recommended that you focus your attention somewhere, at least for the first few minutes, just to settle your attention down. And then once you have settled attention, if you are able, just open into the space of the room and just be present here. Rest in the fact of awareness, the fact that you are here and everything that you see, feel, smell, touch, taste, hear, think, all of it is the awareness showing itself. So I'm going to ring the gong once to let us know that we're starting, and twice to let us know that we're done. Everything we experience is the infinite. But we don't see it because, as we said earlier, we believe our thoughts about it are ultimately real. And we believe that our minds can comprehend the nature of this awareness, this infinite awareness. But as we said before, it's infinite, and our minds are not. We see our breath, our thoughts, our world as objects arising in awareness. And this is really the puzzle, I think, for many people on the path. We tend to believe that awareness is confined to the body, that it is a function of the brain, of the nervous system. Now, this is a valid point, because there's all kinds of research into the brain that shows that there's definitely all kinds of links between memory and a lot of things that we see in brain. But the one thing that never seems to be addressed clearly in science, and really can't be, is awareness. And I used to have these conversations when I used to work in the hospital. I worked in intensive care, and we had a lot of neurosurgical cases. And the neurosurgeons would always come in, and in the quiet times, they just kind of sit around and drink coffee, you know. And it was a great opportunity to pick their brains. And I used to do this on my path because I was steeped in looking, what is this? And I thought, well, the neurosurgeons, they'll be able to give me some real insight into this. And so I'd ask them, and they would just kind of beat around the bush here, you know. And the one guy that I remember clearly, I asked him, he goes, you know, I'm a mechanic. I just get in, I do what I got to do, and I get out. And that's basically it. And I go, well, what about awareness? And he just kind of goes, not his problem. And then after that, I kind of got into teaching neuropathophysiology to critical care nurses for a while. And I really studied it because I was taking an exam in critical care, and I wanted to really get this right. So I studied and studied and studied. And as I got more and more deeply into this, it began to dawn on me that this is all just a huge map. It's a very useful map, but it's like all the rest of the maps that we have in our world. It's a map that allows us to do neurosurgery. It allows us to prescribe glasses. But there's fundamental flaw in this map, and that is that it is just a map. It's thought, once again. Very useful thought, but nevertheless, thought. Now, we have the medical model. I've talked about this before. I'll just mention it briefly. The medical model that we use for understanding vision it's a wonderful model, and it's right on. It's a beautiful map. So we see an object. It comes in through the retina, into the retina. It's, you know, they say it inverts. When it hits the retina, it's inverted because of the lens. The image comes in, and then the retina converts it into electrophysiological impulses and transmits it through the optic chiasm, through neurological tracts, back to the lateral geniculate bodies of the thalamus on either side. And then from there, it is transferred back to the occipital lobe, where we see. And what's interesting about it is if the neurosurgeon goes in and does surgery, if there's a problem in these tracts, he can go in and make a correction. There can be some corrections that can be made. So there's something very legitimate about the map. Just like all maps, you know, if you have a map to go to Ohio, it's gonna, if you follow the thing, you're gonna get to Hawaii, Ohio. So the maps are very functional. But the problem with the medical model of vision is this. You see a cup over there. But actually, according to the medical model, you don't see that cup. You see a neurological modulation of that cup. You can't actually see the cup because it has been transformed into chemical impulses. And your vision is really vision based on the chemistry. So in other words, you have a cup in your mind, and you have a cup over there. But the problem is, and this is kind of a disconnect in science, is that we have no way of verifying that there is a cup out there. We just can't do it. Because we never see that cup. We only see our electrical impulses, our physiological impulses. We don't actually see a real cup. So that is a kind of, if you don't understand exactly what I'm saying, contemplate it. It's complex. But ultimately, what we realize is we never see anything outside of this body-mind. We don't see a world. We see what the science would call a reasonable facsimile of a world, but in fact, we cannot verify that there is a world here. And this is just conveniently overlooked. It doesn't fit the model, so we just don't go there. But this is a crack in the system. And when we do meditation practices, this is what we start to see. There are cracks in our stories and our beliefs. And more as we go, we see more and more cracks. They're everywhere. But we don't see it because we're glossing them over constantly. The mind is essentially set up, conditioned to do this. It ignores what does not affirm it. It grasps at whatever it can to affirm that it is real, that we are what we think we are. Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you did the beginning of this, it's saying, trying to figure ourselves, not knowing where, who, what, I had a little bit of fear.
Oh.
And, well, because it's like, almost like we're blank. And to me, it seemed like the structure, as a fetus to begin with, an embryo fetus and a baby, if I didn't have a human that was believing that she was real, if I grew without any of the structure, I would be either suicidal or insane.
Seemingly, yes.
There's some happiness and there's a lot of sadness in this frame that we live in. But
right.
If I was enlightened at birth, I didn't know it. I'm still not enlightened, and but it's something to hang on to. What else? I mean, there's nothing else myself, nothing else I can do, but
right.
What the structure, imagination, thought is.
So this is important and this is a good question because we want to be, and I want to try to really make this clear. We're not trying to undercut any aspect of our conventional world. And what we really are doing with these investigations is we are going beneath it, not to somehow change our conventional world, but we want insight into the reality of what we are. And when we find that insight, we know on our gut level that what is calling us will not be depressing, because we would not go there if we thought it was going to be. We are being informed by the longing itself that there is something, and we are just moving along that line. We don't really have any choice about this in a sense. It's just that in delusion, our attention has become fuzzy. and we take things, we see reality, but we take it and put it into our story to make our story stronger, and thereby we sidestep what is real, just in an innocent kind of way. But the idea, though, is not that we're trying to, undo what, it's like when we have a child. What is activated when we have a child? Is all this love? We love this child. We don't understand really. We have our metaphors and our stories about self and other and all that. All that stuff is beautiful. There's nothing really wrong with that. Our problem is that when we take it to be real in itself, we discover that we are suffering. And, in a sense, you could say that our life of delusion is spawned with birth. Our birth is sort of the beginning of it. We have inherent delusion kind of in our essence right there, because we feel dualistic almost immediately, and if we don't, our parents help us to. But then we grow through this process of maturation, and at some point, it's been so much fun, and we've had such a great time. It's been such an adventure, but at some point, the suffering that we see and feel, experience, becomes greater than the adventure of being a self. And we start looking deeper. And so the maturation process, it's like this. I mean, this is just one way of talking about it. But
something's missing.
Well, yeah, so you keep going. Yeah. And you continue to mature. You start to look, well, all my life I was seeking happiness. And I was finding it in all kinds of great places. But now it's like I've found all those things, but I'm still feeling this longing. What is this? And so then we are on a spiritual path. Right. So that's kind of what happened. So did that help? Do you understand that we're not...
That's why I'm on this path.
Yes, exactly.
This thing
yeah.
I've never found to what you call the truth that I'm still seeking.
Yes. Well, one thing about this, and we'll get to this in a minute, is we are it already. And all we need to do is discover that. And of course, once we get that deeply, then we're on the path. We want to see what we're doing in every moment that is obscuring our ability to know who and what we are. So that's really what this is about. Yes.
May I just mention something?
Sure.
You were just talking about vision and awareness. In my own life, this moment is such an eye-opener for me because it's what I've been experiencing as I call it losing my sight, but the ophthalmologist tells me it's just a process that we'll take care of later. But I also have glaucoma, so there's spots missing that are blind. But when I came in this morning, and I saw you over there, because I can't see very well, I can't make out detail and stuff, I thought you had a bright blue necktie on. And I had never seen you in a necktie, and I thought, well, this is a real auspicious occasion. I've never seen Todd dressed like that. And I thought, and I just kept looking at you and thinking, and as I got closer, and then your shirt opened a little bit, and I went, that is not a towel, and that's a trivia. Okay, so this has been happening to me in every aspect of my life. You know, I live in my motorhome, and I'm back and forth to the coast, and I can't read signs. And what I see, and I have to know my way almost everywhere I go now. And now I can't trust what I see. And I can't trust my mind makes up all these stories about what I'm seeing. So I have just had to let go of everything that I thought was true based on what I saw and hear, and I can't hear very well either anymore.
And it happens in hearing too, huh? It's the same kind of, you hear people say something and go, why did they say that? And then you ask them and they go, I didn't say that.
Right, and I'm an artist, and I'm losing my sense of touch and my ability to use my hands. And it almost makes me cry. It makes me so happy now. But this made me cry really hard in the last couple of years because everything that I know to be true is not anymore. And my path, thanks to you and everybody here that has, I have the awareness to let go all of these expectations and all of these things. Rather than be sad about them, it's a really exciting moment for me that those little things, when I can't see and it's scaring the hell out of me and I'm trying, the harder I try, the worse it gets, then I can just let that go because I have other ways of driving and walking and hearing and that I use now that work perfectly fine and they don't have any stories with them.
So that's the thing about as we grow older, our spiritual path kind of almost naturally matures if we're paying attention. And if we're not, then when we start seeing things that are aberrant, we can do crazy stuff. Rather than recognizing what's going on, and this is what we do in our life when our senses aren't failing, but our mind has misperceived and we can become cruel. We can do bad things in our life and very hurtful things and cause ourselves a lot of discomfort as well.
We hurt ourselves. I
Exactly.
hurt myself when this was all, and Pat said one time when Joel was speaking, Pat said something, and I have not asked her, but I really thought I understood what she meant when she said something about losing the use of her hands or something like that.
Functioning.
And he misunderstood. I mean, he was thinking that was nothing to organize. And I thought, no, I know exactly what you mean. For a couple of years ago, I was dropping everything, and I was moving too fast, and I wasn't mindful, and that makes you hurt yourself trying harder.
That's right.
And
That's right.
pick on yourself.
Right.
For
That's
not
right.
being adequate.
Well, it's an aging thing in my
But the aging is beautiful when you don't have expectations.
See, that is the thing. We learn to appreciate these lessons that we're given.
Yeah.
And rather than, and this is what the spiritual path really is to appreciate our circumstance, more and more. And we're getting to this here. So,
Thank you very much.
yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so we said earlier that really whenever we see anything, it is truly awareness seeing itself. Now that doesn't really resonate with our experience so much, or maybe for some of you it probably does. But it's not possible for awareness to know anything other than itself. And when awareness sees itself, what it's doing is it's just being itself. Because awareness can't be divided, it can't be separated. And so when we see something, when awareness sees something, it is just being itself. It is the being of itself, showing itself. That's all it is. So it's not like awareness sees something. Whatever it is that's arising arises as the pure knowing of awareness. It is awareness knowing itself. It is like a ripple in the ocean. That thing, it is made out of the ocean. It is water. It is the water of awareness. Whatever is seen is not other than the being of the ocean of awareness. So that's an important point. And as you do your practice, if you just invoke this, it's just a thought. And you see, this is the value of thought. Teachings are all just thoughts. But they're directing attention into your direct experience. They bring attention, rather than letting the attention become diffuse and confused, it's giving it something to look at. Bring your attention here and look at this. So, the reason that this, and I like to bring this up, the reason I like to bring this up is because this is probably the cleanest manifestation of love that you will find. Awareness, knowing itself, is itself. And awareness, by just knowing itself, being itself, it loves itself. I mean, it's prior to even the word love. It's just, it is itself. I mean, right now, if you look at yourself, you realize, well, yeah, I love myself. Now, we don't like to say that, but we do. We take very good care of what we consider to be ourself. And that is because at the core of this thing, it is only awareness loving itself. And by loving itself, it is itself. It can't separate itself. So I say that because what follows needs a certain understanding of what I just said. So does this make sense? Do you follow what I'm getting at here? Do you follow it?
I know what you're saying.
All right, that's good.
I'm not sure what it's getting me.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. As long as you get that awareness only knows itself, and by knowing itself, it is itself. It doesn't separate itself. It can't be other than it. There's only one awareness. You know, when we believe that the awareness is in our biology, then we're confused about this because we see things and they seem to be objects arising in awareness. But no, that's not what's happening. And that's what we start to see. It's not objects arising in awareness. It is awareness knowing itself as itself in whatever form it appears to be. So, when awareness imagines a flower, awareness is not other than the flower. And so we could say that awareness loves the flower. This is an imitation flower, but awareness doesn't care. Awareness loves the flower just as it is. And the flower is not other than the awareness of it. It is the pure being of awareness itself. And so whatever comes in as a form in awareness is awareness loving itself. In fact, we could say that knowing, what we call knowing, awareness, knowing is love itself. To know something is to love it. And this is in the absolute sense. In the Quran, when Muhammad asked Allah, why did we create this cosmos? His response was, I was a hidden treasure that loved or longed to be known. And you can see the validity of what he was saying there. This is a very, very profound teaching. I mean, it sounds like we're anthropomorphizing, but if you look at the essence of what's taking place, it is all God. And so when something appears, it is just God knowing herself. And because it is all God, God loves herself just by being herself. And we might say that awareness is totally devoted to whatever arises in it. It is so intimate. Whatever arises in it, it is the essence of that, whatever that is. This is true intimacy. So what happens in delusion is that love gets split apart. We identify with this sense of self. And by doing so, we like some things that affirm us, and we don't like other things that don't support the story of I. And so we push them away. We grasp some things and we push other things away. Now, all of that grasping and pushing away, awareness loves it. Awareness loves it all. It's perfect. It doesn't have a problem with any of it. But what happens is when we start pushing things away and grasping, we become our own identity. We have lost touch with the reality of what we are, which is the divine. Because we are now pushing some things away, awareness loves those things, just as they are. This is the Garden of Eden and the story of Adam and Eve eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is really what this is about. Because when we start to split things apart in that way, it is our own creation. Now it's what I want and what I don't want, and God is giving it all as a gift. And God loves it all, but we are separating ourselves from the divine through this movement of likes and dislikes. Now, our minds in waking life, in the story of I, see things in their own way. So it's kind of like what we call knowledge is not really knowledge. It's contrivance, as we've said. We can see this whole process very easily, and it's not confusing to us when we think about a very clear dream that we may have had at some point. A dream in which we're just, walking down the road, and we have a river flowing over on the left, and there's a mountain over on the right. And up ahead, we see a vast open vista. And it's beautiful. The sun's shining, the birds are singing. But when we turn our head and look at the mountain, is the mountain already there? I mean, we're in a dream now. We're looking back at a dream we've had. Is the mountain in the dream, is that mountain there before we look at it? Is it? No. It can't be, right? It can't be. So when we look at that mountain, there's the mountain. And when we turn and look at the river, there's the river. But the river is not there until we look at it. All things that we create in the mind are being created moment by moment. We don't see that. And one reason we don't see that is because our thoughts are telling us all the time that that would just not be possible. Things are lawful. The car you parked in the parking lot, it is still there, we say. And when we go out, sure enough, it is. There it is. How do you argue with that? Well, you can't argue with that. The problem that we have is that we think we can understand what's going on. We can't. We can't. All there is awareness knowing itself in this moment. We get caught in the stories, and the stories are self-referential, conditioned stories. So as soon as we see an anomaly in our world, it raises our hackles, we get worried, and we investigate, and we figure out that that was really just this. And so we put a story on it, we put a name on it, just like I've said, you know, the tree. Everything is really just the infinite one. So on our path then, what we need to see is that, first of all, thoughts and feelings are impermanent and constantly new. And then to notice that, yes, the car in the parking lot is a thought. Is there really a car there? It's a perception. This is hard for the mind. I mean, we just struggle with this. But you don't have to struggle with it, really. I think it's useful to hear the teachings and then to deepen your practice and just continue to rest into awareness, and you start to see into the nature of what's going on. We seem to be a separate self, but it is never true. All we experience is the pure knowing. And I have a quote here from Ibn Arabi, and he explains this thing that I was just trying to describe to you about how everything is constantly coming into being. And he says, at the moment God gives them existence, and he's talking about forms, phenomena, at the moment God gives them existence, he ceases loving them. That sounds weird. Because love is directed only at non-existence. So whatever we see in the world is truly non-existent. We've talked about that already. But what he's meaning here is that at the moment God gives them existence, he ceases loving them. He means they cease to exist in that moment. When he ceases loving them, they cease to be. Because love is directed only at non-existence. Hence, he loves the next moment of the thing's existence. Which is to say that he loves the continuity of the thing's existence. This is not temporal, this is not time. It is coming into being through love in this moment. So I know this is a little dense at first, but it's actually not. He's saying that a thing comes into existence through God's love, and once it comes into existence, it ceases to be because he ceases to love it. He doesn't want things to pile up in the world. So by in this way then, he sees it, he loves it, it comes into being, and as soon as it becomes existent, it's gone, because he ceases to love it. But he loves the non-existent form of it, and so he brings it into existence again. And once it comes into existence, he ceases to love it. And what he's saying here is this goes on through eternity, that all forms that are arising are truly non-existent, but they exist as the immutable forms of God. So they exist in a sense, they don't come into existence until he loves them, and then they come into existence. So if you think about this, you can see it is like a motion picture with the frames coming through. The one frame comes in, and there's this person, and then the next frame, and the next frame, and the next frame, And each time that previous frame dissolves away because God ceases to love that being, because that being just came into existence. So this is the kind of cryptic way that he's speaking here. God continues to renew the existence of things ad infinitum. God never ceases to love them for all eternity because they remain forever non-existent. Thus, at each moment, his love for the existence of the non-existent things produces a new creation. So the entire universe is coming into being moment by what he's saying here. That totally destroys our minds. Our minds do not know what to do with that. And the purpose here is not to believe what he is saying, because that would really be dumb. I mean, how could you believe something that ridiculous? Everything's just coming into being, moment by moment? How could that be? Well, when we settle in and we really start to look into our experience, this is what we discover. Things do not exist at any other time other than this moment. And they are always new, coming into being now. Everything is, instead of a noun, everything is a verb. Look around. It looks like things, solid things, but in fact they are coming into being. We are cognizing them now, and now, and now. Yes?
There was a good example in a museum that I saw a newsprint enlarged hugely with the dots this far apart and all the space in between. And if you backed away from it, it turned into a human face. But
oh, yeah.
because that's
a great
really
example.
It's like
Yeah.
you really get the sense of it. You had to step away because it just looked like a bunch of dots.
Yes.
So it was really weird.
This is what we see with when we talk about impermanence. I mean, this is a little cryptic the way he writes this, but I wanted to bring it out because this is Ibn Arabi. He's a guy that Joel quotes all the time, and he is a master sheikh. And he's saying this, and the value of him saying this is that it is worth looking in our experience to see. Could this be true? Could it be true?
Todd?
Yes.
Just the way you explain that, it doesn't seem cryptic to me.
Oh, okay,
It's like
good.
what you have been teaching, what
Yes.
Joel has been teaching.
Yes.
It's what I've learned to do with my thoughts. So that just made even more sense because that is a little cryptic, the teachings in the past about, but now I see that as just what I've learned to do, being mindful or in meditation, I'm letting my thoughts go.
Good.
So now,
good.
and I also, something that I read every morning, I can't remember exactly what it says, but I just look at it, and it's about, I'm not moving into awareness, awareness is appearing to me. So if I think I'm moving into that and making that happen, it's not, it's appearing to me.
It's appearing to awareness, in fact.
On and on.
Yes. So our sense of me is a big part of our delusion, but yet at the same time we say, well, we're always talking about selflessness and that there is no self, but in fact there is a self. Like right now, for example, I'm manifesting a self to be here. In order to give this talk, there has to be some kind of a self. The problem that we get into with the self is that, it's a role. But if we take the role as the reality of what we are, then we're deluded. Because it's just a series of thoughts that are beautifully manifesting. It's all happening by itself. So this whole idea of a thought arising in the moment, defining me as who I am, is very off-putting to the sense of self. But when we look, we begin to see, oh my gosh, there's some truth here. If I stop thinking about myself, where am I? I don't exist. If I stop thinking, there is no self. There is no body. There. So, anyway. Oh, yes, yes.
As the new guy. if we think about how you started the conversation and the commentary about being here to give the lecture and operating in the realm of reality, and that it started at 11 o'clock, it's going to end at this time, and X, Y, Z. How do you reconcile that, the realities of the world in terms of naming, identifying the self, loved ones, the house you live in, the bills that you haven't paid, and that other aspect of not naming it and being connected to awareness? Because if you don't have that balance, that's what gets us in a lot of trouble.
You said it right there. We need that balance. That's exactly it. We need to see, and we talked about this earlier a little bit, but basically, we want to allow our, here's an example. When I had this awakening back in 2004, and I was working in a very busy ICU, and it was chaos there almost all the time, and I had this awakening, and my whole world was just kind of different. And I remember driving to work thinking, I'm going to lose my job tonight. I just knew it, because I can't possibly function now in this place. I mean, everything is just space. Everything is just open awareness. And so I get to the hospital, and I just go in, I just kind of assume I'm going to be losing my job, and it's okay. At that point, I don't really care. Pretty happy, I go in, I put on my little scrubs and everything, and then it just starts happening. I'm like taking care of patients, I'm getting report, and I notice it's just happening by itself. Everything is just happening as it would have anyway. I haven't done anything different. In fact, my functioning on the job was so much cleaner because I wasn't neurotic like I usually was, So the idea then is you take care of, in your mind, the conditioned mind, the conventional mind, about your wife at home and your house, and you got to water the grass, or all the things, they just unfold. They take care of themselves. It's not about pushing any of that away, not even changing it. What we want to do is go deeper, and really we're coming to know what we are, and that coming to know what we are does not have to affect our conventional world at all. What we'll notice is we're a little bit nicer. We start realizing that everything's one. We can't help but feel our heart opening when we see suffering. We love. We manifest loving, but we also manifest wisdom. Wisdom is the way that we keep loving from becoming, crazy. Because we can be loving, but we have to also be wise in the way that we apply our love and the way that we are compassionate. So I don't know. Did that help answer your question?
It did in a certain, because I don't know that there's necessarily an answer. So it was more in that we're speaking in a realm of, in part, philosophical thought, or just to use thought without the philosophical part of it.
Yeah.
And then there is the reality of, hey, I have to go drive the car to the gas station. So and that could be my reality, that I'm driving to the gas station, and that's unfolding and it's happening, and that's just what it is.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And so, it's not really philosophy, though. And the reason, it can be, because the way we're talking, we're just chit-chatting about it here. But the reality of this is to bring it into your practice, to bring it into a daily committed meditation practice, and to bring mindfulness into your experience, to be able to recognize the awareness that is here, that is always here, ever present. And yet, all of this, I'm mowing the grass, I'm driving my car, it's all just happening. And you realize, like when you get in the car and you start driving it, if you got a stick shift or whatever, it just happens, if you notice. Like right now, we're having this conversation. It's just happening. It's like it has, as they say, it has a mind of its own. And it does. It's just it's all conditioned to play a certain way. And as we meditate on these things, we begin to see the reality of what is taking place. There is nobody here. They're doing anything. It is all just happening by itself.
One thing, Todd, I appreciate you talking with everybody.
Yeah.
But as the dear lady mentioned, some of us, as we get older, the mind doesn't work so much. And the blank spaces, and nothing is arising. And it's so peaceful, and it's so calming. If there's some insight as to what's going on. And then there's space, emptiness, and realizing, no thoughts. And then maybe one thought shows up or something shows up.
Yeah.
But yet just to be present and it's a blessing. There's blessings in getting older if you have wisdom.
If you don't get scared.
Right. And realize, gee, when the mind gets quiet, that's what it's all about. The space, the quietness. And
Yes, that's great. That's exactly right.
everything comes out of
So you see, aging is actually not such a bad thing. We don't have to we can enjoy it. It's a process.
Todd, when you say neurotic, do you mean emotional?
I just-
Would that be, because, I can totally relate to what you're saying about being neurotic, and I'm hyper emotional, and
It's just not being focused, very, very focused, because you have too many thoughts coming through and you're just distracted.
but
That's
your
all.
mind is taking off on what it means rather than letting things happen.
Yeah.
As they're supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
So
you're...
that's kind of overly emotional about stuff. right?
Well, sometimes, yeah, if you get overly emotional, I mean, it's complex. Neurosis can be
I just wanted to
defined in many ways.
What
Yeah.
you meant.
Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to kind of skip ahead here because I think I've covered most of what I had in my notes. So as you walk out of here today and you're thinking about everything being awareness, the mind will very easily discount all that has been said. And we need to know that the mind has a function, and there's nothing wrong with the fact that it is doing that. It has to assert itself. It has to take care of business. So we're not trying to change the mind. What we want to do is go beneath. We want to have insights which are non-conceptual, to see into the nature of what this is. So let's just take a moment here. I want you to really get a sense of what we're talking about with awareness. Right now, you are aware. How do you know you are aware? How do you know?
You just know.
Yeah, you just know. Right, exactly. How do you know? What is it that knows?
Awareness.
Yes, yes. Awareness knows that it is aware, and it is not a thought behind that. There's no thought that's telling you. So right now, I'm just going to ask you this question, and let's just take a moment and settle into this question. Are you aware? notice how it brings you right here to recognizing something totally nonverbal, totally direct. And this, which is aware of itself, right? That's in our experience. We know we are aware because we are aware of being aware. Now bring your attention to the gong striker. Notice it is arising, the gong striker is arising as this same awareness. Now we think, well, the gong striker itself is not this awareness, but our awareness is aware of the gong striker, and that's not it. What you see, what you're experiencing here, is the awareness itself. This, what we call a gong striker, is awareness aware of itself. Now, can you find a gong striker outside of awareness? No. We make that assumption that there is one out here, but in fact that is the delusion itself. That is how we become deluded. Everything that you see is a manifestation of awareness, just as it is in this moment, coming into being just now. So here is a quote, I'll end with this. It's a quote from Sufi Awad al-Din Balyani. He says, he, meaning God, he is not in anything, and no thing is in him. In other words, all of it is him. He is not in anything, and no thing is in him. It is in this way that you should know him, and not through theoretical knowledge, reason, understanding, or conjecture. No one sees him except himself. No one reaches him except himself. And no one knows him except himself. He knows himself through himself, and he sees himself by means of himself. So everything that we experience in our life is this awareness. But notice, that has no meaning at all to the mind. No meaning at all. And so the practice really is to allow yourself to rest in awareness and to recognize more and more that it is the only thing that you ever experience. You never experience a thing in the world. And through this process, you begin to feel, experience directly the peace of true being, the timeless nature. All of our fears, fear of death, it's all eliminated because we are not a separate body-mind. We are this awareness that is aware just now. And the more we discover that, the more we realize the joy that we have been seeking through our longing forever, for our whole life. So, any questions about any of that? It doesn't really lend itself very well to questions, actually. Yes.
I just want to offer up one of Tom Kurska's sayings that supports your car example. And then I'm sure you can get more juice out of it than that. He says, if it's not here, and you're not thinking about it, then where the hell is it?
Exactly. Yes, but the mind, of course, knows where it is. It's out in the parking lot. And that's fine, too. So, that's just a story. And because, we could go out there and the parking lot's been cleaned out. Somebody, one of these master car thieves showed up and cleaned out the parking lot, and we go out and it's like, whoa, it wasn't here. See, we don't know really. It's just the mind. It's just thought, story. So, yes.
Well, this doesn't have much to do with anything except that it helps me when I'm trying to figure something out, is that I just remember what it's like to sleep and be unconscious in my sleep, which I don't know what it's like because all I know is that I love my sleep like everybody else.
Yes.
And I've got to get my sleep. And there's long periods of time where I don't know, seemingly don't know anything, but I'm not afraid of that at all.
That's great.
I want it. So I don't understand it. It makes me happy, and I feel great when I get it. So I just, it helps me stop trying so hard to figure stuff out in my head.
That's good. That's great. Anything that we can do to kind of ease off from our trying to figure it out, it's so helpful. I mean, I look at my own experience, having taught neuropathophysiology for years. That was hard for me to break through because I just believed all this. And so I had to think about everything infinitely. But eventually you realize something, and then it's kind of like what you're expressing. When you rest in dreamless sleep, the body and mind, they're gone. You don't have one. There's just awareness. You are actually resting in the truth of your being when you're resting in dreamless sleep, and it's joyous. We go, well, no, it's not joyous because I'm not getting to do the things I like to do, and I'm not. That isn't it. All the things that we love to do, all the stories, they all run out after a while, and it's not. There's no joy in it in the end. I remember when I was a little kid, it was like, it's gonna be Christmas soon. And it was like, whoa, yeah, it's coming. And then Christmas is here, and whoa. In summer vacations, you're like waiting, and it's like the last day of school, and it's like, yes, it's whoa. And it's wonderful. Well, after it's happened a few times, it's like less wonderful. Wow, where is the joy in that? What was it that we were seeking the whole time? What we're seeking is that joy that you find in dreamless sleep. We don't know that. But the thing is that when we become lucid in dreamless sleep, we realize this is so delicious. This is why we've been striving to find our true happiness, our whole life, all of our efforts to find the truth of our being. They truly pay off in that moment because you realize there's nothing here. There's nothing that can hurt you. There's nothing to get. There's nothing to grasp. There's nothing to get away from. It's all perfect. And it's you. Okay, well, till we meet again, peace to you all.